So what does Yu-Gi-Oh still have going on for it? What makes it unique? What makes it special? What makes it stand out from other games till this day? In this video, we're going to be focusing more on modern Yu-Gi-Oh, the way that the game is currently played, but we're certainly going to make a reference to previous iterations of the IP and the game in general. So number one is very obvious. I almost don't want to talk about it because it's so on the nose and everybody knows this, but I couldn't make a video like this and not bring this up. The first thing that makes Yu-Gi-Oh so special and so recognizable till this day is the IP itself. Any millennial out there that had access to a TV knows what Yu-Gi-Oh is, knows what the Dark Magician is, knows what the Blue Eyes is. It is so recognizable. You can go to any anime convention, you will always find somebody cosplaying as Kaiba or Yugi or the Dark Magician girl, whatever. So I'm not going to belabor the point and spend too much more time on this one because it's so obvious and on the nose. Everybody knows that Yu-Gi-Oh is extremely recognizable. Everybody knows what it is till this day. But I do think that it's important to mention as one of the things that makes it so special because it's what makes, say, Pokemon special. There's no other TCG out there other than Pokemon that has such a strong and recognizable IP. It is definitely one of the main things Yu-Gi-Oh still has going on for it till this day. It's no wonder Konami is constantly trying to nostalgia pander and call back old players with tins that have Yugi and the Dark Magician or whatever on it, right? They're constantly making this appeal to nostalgia because Yu-Gi-Oh was such a part of that millennial zeitgeist. It was such a big part of our childhood. And I think that this is really important, even if it's obvious and on the nose, because there are other huge TCGs like, say, Magic that don't have that. And don't get me wrong, I love Magic the Gathering, but it doesn't have Yugi and the Dark Magician. It doesn't have Kaiba and the Blue Eyes. It doesn't have Joey. It just doesn't have that same star power. It's not as iconic. And frankly, as of late, if they had any sort of recognition or branding, they're diluting it with weird collabs with, like, I think WWE, My Little Pony, and all this other weird crap. So I think that that's a huge W for Yu-Gi-Oh, even though I'm not the biggest fan of the general artistic direction and the way the game looks now. At least we're not doing SpongeBob collabs. I will take Purelli, Fluwanderies, Exo Sisters, and whatever else you want to throw at me, Live Twins. I will take any of that over SpongeBob and My Little Pony collabs. Like, I'm sorry. I think this leads us pretty smoothly into reason number two why Yu-Gi-Oh is still so iconic, and it's the archetypes. Now listen, I just mentioned how Yu-Gi-Oh is very iconic and has that strong star power, and when I'm talking about that, as you heard, I'm pretty much just talking about duel monsters. The reality is that the pop culture zeitgeist for Yu-Gi-Oh is duel monsters. You know, say what you will of the other animes. I like them a lot too, but that is really where the star power is. Now, with that said, for the people that actually continued playing the card game as opposed to just watching the anime, I've never met a single person that tells you they didn't like GX or 5Ds. As a matter of fact, most people that I know stopped playing the game after Edison, after 5Ds around that time, but up until then, nobody had anything bad to say, whether it's the anime or the game. You can absolutely make the argument that the face of Yu-Gi-Oh is duel monsters, and I would probably agree with you, but most people would disagree. A lot of people would tell you that GX is a huge part of that, and so is 5Ds. And it's not just about singular specific characters or specific cards, especially starting in GX. What really became iconic were the archetypes, and it's something that I think Yu-Gi-Oh does better than anybody. Archetypes are really something that makes Yu-Gi-Oh truly unique. It makes every card feel like they're part of a family, like they're part of a team, and I think it's one of the cooler things that the game has going for it. This is where the conversation needs to get a little bit more in depth, because I think that a huge missed potential and a huge grievance with the game is coming from this now. Duel Monsters was such an iconic era that Konami has now built entire archetypes around one of those cards, like the Dark Magician, for example. As you can see, that's kind of what I'm playing right now. The gameplay that you're seeing here, I'm playing a weird hybrid Dark Magician and Buster Blader anti-dragon type of deck that I made up. But how cool is it that these iconic cards like Gaia, like the Dark Magician, Buster Blader, the Blue Eyes, the Red Eyes, all these iconic cards from the DM era have entire archetypes built around them now. That is one of my absolute favorite things that Konami has been doing for a while now, is taking these iconic cards and making archetypes around them. I love this. Now really quick, let's just forget the Duel Monsters era for a second and let's just really focus on archetypes, because well before they designed support around these iconic cards came the idea of entire families and archetypes. There are so many cool and iconic archetypes back from the GX era or the 5Ds era that pretty much any Yu-Gi-Oh player remembers them and remembers them very fondly, wishes they could still play it. Whether it was the Elemental heroes or the Destiny heroes or the Evo heroes, or whether it was Cyber Dragons or it was Six Samurai or it was X Sabers or it was the beloved Black Wings or the Light Sworns, there are so many archetypes that are just so iconic and everybody knows what they are till this day. People will come back to this game just because their favorite archetype from the 5Ds era got support, like say Six Samurai. I literally know people that came back just for that reason. Same thing with Super Heavy Samurai. When the support for that came out, a lot of people came back to the game just because of that. Yes, you could absolutely say that most TCGs have something like that, right? Let's use Pokemon one more time as the example, but we could use Magic also, we could use Digimon, whatever. You can say that there's water type Pokemons, you could say there's fire, there's grass, psychic, whatever. What's really recognizable about Pokemon though is the individual monsters. It's not so much the archetype of electric Pokemon or whatever. There's maybe two of those that are iconic or one, like Pikachu. It's not quite like Yu-Gi-Oh, where the entire archetype itself, the way it looks and how it plays, is so iconic 2 decades later or a decade and a half or whatever. And this is one of the areas that I think Konami is messing up, and they really need to double down on this. I've mentioned on this channel before, many times, that one of the main problems that I have with this game is the business model. I've mentioned the fact that it seems that Konami has an extremely vertically aggressive business growth model, and they're constantly reinventing the wheel. They're constantly coming out with new archetypes. I'm not even talking about the gameplay balance or what it looks like, and we'll get there. That's a separate conversation. But when it specifically comes to the archetypes themselves and the way that they look and how iconic they are, that is a big problem when you constantly keep reinventing the wheel as opposed to tuning it. A lot of people have these archetypes that they love and they really wish that they could play, but unfortunately it takes like a decade for them to get support. Your favorite archetype from 2012 or whatever hasn't seen play for the last decade, and now finally 10 years later, Konami digs it up from the grave and gives it some support, and it'll be relevant for a grand total of 30 days. But back in the day, it really felt like you had time to appreciate and fall in love with the archetypes that were coming out. They had time to marinate and become iconic. And that's something that I don't understand. I understand, wanting to make money in a game that has no rotation and constantly, making newer and better cards and power creep being a thing, but you can do that with existing archetypes. People will probably love you for it. Instead of creating new archetypes, why not bring existing archetypes up to speed? Or, okay, fine, create new archetypes, but also do that. I know so many people that come back to the game specifically when their archetype gets some sort of support. Anyway, I spent way too much time on this, let's move on, but I really feel like the game should focus more on tuning the Ferrari as opposed to replacing it every year. I don't think that we really need a constant new car model. We just need you to enhance the existing car. Take advantage of the fact that you have so many talented artists and such good card and game design that so many of these decade-old archetypes are still beloved till this day. It's not just Yugi and the Dark Magician, it's not just Kaiba and the Blue Eyes, that's a component of it, but there's so much more of this stuff. There are so many more beloved cards and archetypes that have just been forgotten to time for no reason. I guarantee you that there are more people out there waiting for more hero support than there are people, waiting for Fiendsmith or waiting for Tenpai or whatever. Alright, so let's move on to reason number 3 why Yu-Gi-Oh is so special till this day. We love to complain about Yu-Gi-Oh, and I'm definitely one of the biggest offenders of that, and I'm not ashamed. I think there's a lot of things that are out of control with the game at this point. However, one of the things that definitely makes Yu-Gi-Oh unique is the way it plays. Whether it be older Yu-Gi-Oh, GX 5Ds era, all the way up to current Yu-Gi-Oh, there's nothing that plays like it. Nothing. You could say that something like Magic the Gathering is also very unique because it pioneered a lot of the concepts that other card games like Pokemon use now. But the reality is that the game is fairly simple and a lot of these concepts have been overused. Most games kind of play very similar to Magic. I think because the game is so simple and straightforward and there's a lot of beauty and, that's one of the things that makes Magic good, it also makes it very easy to copy and very easy to make card games that derive similar ideas from it because it's so simple and straightforward. This is something we could spend like 10 hours talking about, just this one point alone. The way that the game works, the mechanics, I have 1,000 things to say about this. I've made entire videos that are dedicated just to talking about this, so I don't want to spend too much time on it. The gist of my opinions when it comes to the complexity and mechanics of the game is that it peaked somewhere around Edison. The peak and golden age of this game was sometime around 5Ds. Every turn was very engaging, whether you were the one attacking or defending. Even if you're on the receiving end, it felt like there were so many answers and so many things that you could do that it was entertaining to be on that end also. A lot of card games have this feeling of it's fun when it's your turn, then when your opponent plays, you're kind of just taking it, and it's not very fun. Yu-Gi-Oh has always been unique because of that. Unfortunately, too much of a good thing can become a bad thing, and I think that that's exactly what happened with Yu-Gi-Oh. Again, like I said before, I don't want to dwell on this point too much. I've talked about it in other videos, and I feel like everybody kind of knows the common mainstream criticisms for the modern game. It's not your main phase, it's our main phase. Endless solitaire combo turns, locking the entire board with Omni Negates, extremely and overly resilient engines that can't be stopped, boards that always end on the same boss monsters, decks that virtually play the same way because they're so overly consistent, and we could just go on on a list, which I've done before, I've done in other videos, don't want to do it on this one. With that said, like I mentioned, for better or for worse, even modern Yu-Gi-Oh is still very unique. There's still nothing that plays quite like it. I am personally not a fan of it. I really don't like what they've done with the game, but a lot of people do, and it is very unique. The problem that I have is that it's evolved into chains, and I don't like this whole idea of chaining different things in combos because it feels like a needlessly more arduous version of something we already had. Everybody loves to meme and criticize and talk about the wall of text in Yu-Gi-Oh cards, right? And how that's a huge turnoff. But really, that's what makes Yu-Gi-Oh Yu-Gi-Oh. And that's not something new either. That's not something that didn't exist 10 years ago. Yu-Gi-Oh cards have always been, books. It's always been a massive amount of text. 5D cards weren't that different. They already had that whole box of text going on with every single monster. That's not new. The difference though is that the chains weren't as long. The combos weren't that arduous and, there weren't that many steps. Now it doesn't feel like the game has become more complex. It feels like the game has a over and excessive emphasis on transitions. 99% of modern Yu-Gi-Oh cards are pretty much just one big mathmech circular. They're the same exact card that's just a means to an end to get to the same boss monster. There's nothing special about them, they're just a transition card. And that is why, in my opinion, even though the cards look the same, Yu-Gi-Oh has become and feels way more arduous to play because it's this loop that doesn't end. The reason why modern Yu-Gi-Oh feels like one big game of solitaire is exactly this. This is the culprit of all evils of the modern game. The reason why Yu-Gi-Oh feels like solitaire and people's turns never end is not because of the wall of text on the cards. That's always been there. It's not because of any fundamental mechanic of the game. It's not because of pendulums. I just say that because everybody hates pendulums and blames them for being like when Yu-Gi-Oh got bad or whatever, when they quit. Honestly, I feel like the problem was way more exacerbated by link cards, and I like link cards just fine. I think that there was a way to make that without creating the current state of affairs. Because if the problem was really pendulums, or it was links, or it was XYZs or whatever, we could just smite that one thing and the game would be fixed. Unfortunately, that's not the problem. So I'm not going to go ahead and blame one summoning mechanic as the culprit for all evil, but I am going to say that the main problem with Yu-Gi-Oh now is absolutely transitions. Are negates a problem? Absolutely. Are overly resilient engines a problem? Absolutely. Is everything else that I said also a problem? Yes. But I think that most people will agree with you that the thing they hate the most about Yu-Gi-Oh is just sitting and watching their opponent just play by themselves. One of the most annoying and fatiguing things for me now, and when I log into Master Duel, I can play like 10 games and I'm done. And yes, there's multiple components to this conversation, but it's not because I'm sitting there remembering the golden days of when I used to play with X-Sabers and, I used to be a teenager and play a Locals and I remembered the game how it was back then, or I missed the Dark Magician. That's not what's going on. Dare I say that even though I hate hand traps and I hate negates, that's not even the biggest problem. The true core existential problem of Yu-Gi-Oh is watching your opponent endlessly play. That is the way that the game has evolved, and it's the way that it currently plays. And I don't really know how to fix it at this point. I don't know how to slow it down. When people complain about modern Yu-Gi-Oh, that's what they blame. 99% of people that I hear, at least on my comments and my channel, is they complain about solitaire games. And it's true. Games are decided on turn 1 most of the time. It's turn 1 and you just watch your opponent play by themselves for 20 minutes nonstop. There's nothing you could have done and now the game's over. And then you try to play on your turn and they negate everything and the game's over. If you were to even keep the core of the experience the same exact thing, at least if it was shorter, if the turns didn't last as long, it wouldn't be so painful because we can move on type of thing. And yes, I know you can surrender, but generally speaking, you don't forfeit, right? That's not how the game... I mean, a game where you want to surrender on the first turn, is that really a good thing? So even if they kept everything the same, if they somehow managed to fix this endless loop of transitions, I think that 80% of the grievances would be gone. This is my opinion. Let's move on here. I told you I was going to end up spending way too long on this point if I got into it. Number 4, Jesus, we got 10 of these to go. Okay, number 4 is the competitive scene. Yu-Gi-Oh has a very healthy and growing competitive scene, which is very strange because I live in a big city that you probably heard of, and it should be very easy for me to find people to play Yu-Gi-Oh with. It should be easy to find locals. Unfortunately, it is not. I literally can't find people to play Yu-Gi-Oh with me. I can't find a card shop that sells Yu-Gi-Oh products or that even hosts any sort of event. There's a local card shop that's probably the biggest one in the state that I live, and I'm fairly close to the owner, and we've had this conversation before because they stopped hosting Yu-Gi-Oh events. And they don't really carry any Yu-Gi-Oh products whatsoever. And what's funny is I've had this same conversation with a shop owner that is the biggest shop for Yu-Gi-Oh in another country. Same conversation. Same reason why. So this is not a North America specific issue because in South America, it's the same reason why card shops don't carry Yu-Gi-Oh anymore. It's the same reason why it's dead. Reason number 1, the product just doesn't sell. And you could say that that has nothing to do with the game's popularity, I guess, but somehow Pokemon sells just fine. Somehow everything sells just fine. It's very hard to move Yu-Gi-Oh product for whatever reason. You could say it's because of online stores and different things like that, that Yu-Gi-Oh players in general are very sweaty and competitive, and the packs are just not very good, so why not just buy singles? The tins are not really worth it, so you're better off just buying what you actually want type of thing. I think that that's all very fair, right? But if I had to give my opinion and I were to tell you what I really think it comes down to is that Yu-Gi-Oh just doesn't have a casual scene anymore. The reason why Pokemon products move, and you could argue that Pokemon is highly collectible, so there's that, so Pokemon's not the best example, but other games. The reason those games move product is because they have a stronger casual scene, and Yu-Gi-Oh just doesn't. That is the main issue. There are other issues also, like most card shop owners have told me, like the reason we also don't host it is because it just got violent. Like for some reason, Yu-Gi-Oh has this kind of this reputation for fights breaking out. Like the community is notoriously very toxic, but it's also considered violent. That's something that I didn't know about, but it's a story that I'm hearing over and over, and I've now heard it from multiple card shop owners that Yu-Gi-Oh players are violent. Now, obviously, this doesn't apply to everybody, but they're saying, yeah, man, we've never had fights break here, and it seems that only Yu-Gi-Oh causes it, so we got rid of it. I find that so bizarre. I don't know why, I would think that Pokemon would cause robbery and violence, but it's Yu-Gi-Oh that doesn't. To me, that's so weird. But when it comes down to it, like I said, I really think the main reason is you can't find locals. There's nobody to play Yu-Gi-Oh with because pretty much everybody that still plays Yu-Gi-Oh are people that are, millennials that are in their 30s now. People that got jobs and they got money and they like to compete. The bottom line is that one of the things that makes Yu-Gi-Oh still very popular till this day is a very strong, dedicated, robust, competitive scene, for better or for worse. Number 5. Constant support. Say what you will about Konami. I've criticized them plenty. It seems that they don't listen to the player base, that a lot of the feedback just goes into a black hole and nobody ever listens. The ban lists often feel weird. New archetypes that they come out with completely overpower everything and become a tier 0 mirror match fest. So there's a lot to criticize. However, the support is definitely there. One thing that you can't say is that Konami doesn't support their game, is that Konami doesn't care or try or whatever. I think they need to slow down a little bit. Like I said, things need a little bit more time to marinate, and I think that there is more value in tuning the current meta than constantly reinventing it. But they absolutely care about their game, and there's constantly new stuff coming out from it. Yu-Gi-Oh really feels fresh for the most part, for sure. Number 6. high replay value. This is also something we can just quickly mention and move on, but yeah, Yu-Gi-Oh really has high replay value compared to everything else. I love the Pokemon TCG. I made an entire video after I hit our sales league on Pokemon TCG Live talking about my experience getting to that top rank. I talked about the things that I like about the Pokemon TCG, where they succeed, that they've kept their identity, something that Yu-Gi-Oh kind of lost, but there is something to be said about the replay value. You know, Pokemon is a very simple game, and it kind of drags on for a little too long. You could make a similar criticism about Magic, for example, but I'll just talk about Pokemon since it's, you know, I've compared the two games before. There was a point in my climb there to our sales league where I was definitely just grinding. You know, I just wanted the achievement after a certain point, and it was definitely fun, don't get me wrong. But Pokemon, because of its simplicity, definitely gets repetitive, and I do feel like the games, they go on a little longer than they should. Yu-Gi-Oh has that replay value because games are done very, very fast, and there's a lot that happens constantly, right? I think that a lot of that replay value has been lost because of a lot of these mechanical problems we talked about. It just unfortunately gets very, very repetitive, which is not something Yu-Gi-Oh used to suffer from. Yu-Gi-Oh used to be very unique for that reason. Every game felt different. Every game felt like a new experience for sure. Nowadays, even if you do see a certain variety of decks, which a lot of times you don't because of tier 1 or tier 0 meta, you end up seeing a lot of mirror matches. But generally speaking, as I'm climbing the ladder in Master Duel, I see a lot of variety of decks. However, there's just this ever constant feeling that even though I'm playing against different decks and using different decks, the games kind of go down the exact same way always, and that bores me of the game very fast. I still think that Yu-Gi-Oh does in fact have a little more replay value compared to most other TCGs, but that's kind of dying off. I don't know if you could still say that, frankly. At least at a competitive level, and that's the problem really, because a lot of this conversation, if not all of this conversation, is current meta. It's ranked. That is an argument that a lot of players will make, and I really think that they have a good point. When you play Yu-Gi-Oh at a casual level, when you play with quote-unquote fun decks, the experience is still very fun, and because the game doesn't have rotation, which we'll get into, you can still play everything. Kitchen table Yu-Gi-Oh is still very fun. Yu-Gi-Oh at a casual level, it's still extremely fun. If you set with another friend and, you know, you guys make certain tier restrictions or choose what structure decks you're going to play against each other, there is for sure a lot of fun to be had there. And that's really where I think the magic is at. The place where I feel like the magic dies is when you get into competitive. But isn't that the way it's always been? You could make that argument, right? When people criticize modern Yu-Gi-Oh, the most common counter criticism that I hear is that, well, competitive Yu-Gi-Oh was always boring. Like, it was actually way more boring back in the DM era. It was always very boring. I don't agree because I competed in the 5Ds era and it was different, but to an extent, I do get that argument that they're saying, yeah, man, when you're in Master Duel playing ranked or you're at a YCS, you're gonna have a very repetitive experience where it's not gonna be as fun because nobody's there to have fun. They're there to win. So I think that that's really valid. When we talk about modern Yu-Gi-Oh and all the criticisms, we're absolutely talking about the competitive scene. But here's the criticism I've made before. The reason for that is because all that there is the competitive scene. I don't know anybody that wants to play kitchen table Yu-Gi-Oh. I can't even find the locals. Anybody that I know that still plays Yu-Gi-Oh is like grinding on Master Duel or is at a YCS or something. They're not like at their kitchen table with their buddy playing Yu-Gi-Oh. That just doesn't exist. The only place that I've seen that this sort of experience still even exists are these obscure Facebook group meetups type of thing, right? These people that coordinate on Facebook and they go to some dude's house and they play the game the way that they want. Now, number one, those are not easy to find. And number two, I don't know these people. I'm not going to go to some dude's house I never met. Sorry. Would love to have that experience at a place that is, you know, within 2-hour distance drive from my house. Can't seem to find it. Or hey, even better, would love if Master Duel had Edison and GOAT format or other Time Wizard formats. Why don't they? Oh, that's right. Probably because these are closed formats, so you can't print new cards for it, and people love these formats. So what would Konami do if these formats became more popular than the current game? They would be screwed because they wouldn't be able to print and sell new cards, so that's why it's not there. And that right there really pisses me off and makes me not want to play Yu-Gi-Oh! There is no reason other than greed why Edison and Goat can't be in Master Duel. There's no fucking reason for that. The only reason I can think of is the reason I just gave you. They're afraid of losing sales. They know that this era of the game is way better than the current one, and they're afraid that there's going to be more people playing that than the modern game, and they won't be able to make more money. And my answer to that is, why don't you just reboot a parallel format that starts from Edison, and then you can print new cards for that format? Why not just do that, man? You're gonna shut up everybody that's complaining about the modern game. They can play the game the way that they want. You can still make money selling new cards for that tier of play. And all the people that like the modern game can keep playing that if they want, and you can keep making money off of that. It's a perfect plan. Please hire me. Reason number 7 why Yu-Gi-Oh is so unique. It's players playing together at the same time. Now, as I've stated before, we already talked about this. No need to dwell on this point much longer. This has become one of the downfalls of Yu-Gi-Oh, where it's not your main phase, it's our main phase type of thing. No one likes that. But it is still one of the things that, even in modern Yu-Gi-Oh, make it very unique. The fact that even when you're on the receiving end, when you're defending, you're still playing like it was your turn to attack type of thing. It's still very active and engaging. Now, I think it's obvious by now that I have a bias where I think that the old way the game used to play had a lot of that and wasn't as ridiculous as it is now. So I don't think I need to tell you that I think that during Edison era, this was done way better and still was extremely engaging. But for what it's worth, modern Yu-Gi-Oh still has that, and your turn is also engaging even if you're just defending type of thing. Funny how things have changed, where modern Yu-Gi-Oh's claim to fame is that we're always playing together. It's never boring because it's always our main phase, right? Yet somehow that's not really what it feels like. It feels like there's always one player watching the other player do their thing, and the other one is just endlessly waiting. Reason number 8, Master Duel. The digital platform is fantastic. Again, not something that I need to spend 2 hours talking about. I have an entire video dedicated just to saying how amazing Master Duel is. I think it's the best digital TCG platform ever made, but I do think there's a lot of missed opportunity. I've talked about this on the video that I'm showing here, where I think that Master Duel should be turned into a Yu-Gi-Oh hub. Master Duel is really becoming the physical game killer. More and more people are becoming digital-only players, and there's 100 reasons for that, whether it be the cost, whether it be the way that the game works. In my opinion, the game is more conducive now to being played with the assistance of a computer. It's crazy when you play it physical. Also, we talked about the community being toxic. We talked about there not being a place to play, like there's no locals type of thing. There's a million different reasons, but I really think that Master Duel needs to be turned into a Yu-Gi-Oh hub. All things Yu-Gi-Oh should happen there. That means that you should be able to play any and all Yu-Gi-Oh formats on Master Duel. You should be able to watch the anime on Master Duel. New episodes for the anime should be advertised on Master Duel. You should be able to buy and play other famous RPG games or other Yu-Gi-Oh games through Master Duel if licensing and all that would allow for it. You should be able to play Dungeon Dice Monsters on Master Duel. Why not? Why can't there be a modern Master Duel version of Dungeon Dice Monsters? That is the real question. That is what this entire video comes down to. Why are we not getting a modern Dungeon Dice Monster game? Why can't Master Duel provide that? Probably because I'm the only guy that cares about this. I'm probably like the only person that likes Dungeon Dice Monsters. But I feel like it's a missed opportunity. It's yet another avenue, another game where Konami could make money off of that. Let's use League of Legends as an example, right? When you go to the League of Legends, the Riot client, you don't just get to play League of Legends. You also get to play Teamfight Tactics. If you don't know, TFT is like this different version or different game entirely that uses the same IP as League of Legends. I don't really play League anymore, but I do play TFT, and I play it on my phone also. So what I'm trying to say is, why can't Dungeon Dice Monsters be Master Duel's TFT just like League has? Why can't it be its separate like little mini game? Now you could create an entirely different mini game, I guess, but there's already a thing there, and there's already a lot of people that like that. So why not make that thing Dungeon Dice Monsters? That is my pitch here for Konami. This is an actual pitch. Forget all my other criticisms, forget all my other videos. I'll delete all of them if you just were to make Dungeon Dice Monsters on Master Duel. That is like the one thing I am personally asking from you, please. Reason number 9 why Yu-Gi-Oh is so special and so unique. It does not have rotation. Now, I am one of the people that has actively advocated for Yu-Gi-Oh! To have a rotation. I don't think that this whole no rotation thing is working. I think that not having it is exactly what has caused the game to become what it is now. And I've also said this in other videos, to say that Yu-Gi-Oh! Doesn't have rotation is just a gimmick. It absolutely does have rotation. But it has the worst kind ever. We get our rotation through ban lists and through new sets that replace old sets, new tier 0 decks that replace everything else. Oh, but you can still technically play with your Dark Magician deck. Yes, but it's not viable. So you might as well just say that you do have a rotation, because the only thing that's currently viable to play is Tearlaments or Kashtira or Fiendsmith or whatever. There's always the one thing. Now, absolutely, there's usually a few decks that can kind of compete, and some of them, come back when they get some support and they stay alive for a little bit longer. The one that really comes to mind here is Branded, right? It feels like Branded has been hanging on there for so long. But realistically speaking, there's your rotation, right? Every time a new tier 0, tier 1 set comes out, it just overpowers everything else. You effectively have the same result as a rotation. So why not just have a semi-rotation or an actual rotation where either everything gets rotated out, or there's a set of specific cards that never goes away and the cards around it get rotated, which would be that semi-idea. For better or for worse, not having an official rotation system is one of the things that makes Yu-Gi-Oh! Unique, and it is one of the things that people love. I feel though that most of the people that like this are people that collect the physical product, and often what I hear is that, oh, if they did that I would quit because all my cards are now worthless or whatever. So I don't know, people say that they like that the game doesn't have rotation, but every argument I've ever heard is like for the wrong reasons in my opinion, but it does make the game unique, I guess. Now the final reason that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is so unique. Reason number 10. It is the artwork. Now, don't worry, if you've been subscribed to this channel for a while, I'm not going to go on that rant. I feel like anybody who's been around this channel for any length of time, when they hear the word artwork, it just triggers this instant Vietnam PTSD type of thing on everybody that's been listening to me talk for at least a year. So don't worry, I'm not about to drag you guys on this rabbit hole once again, I promise. But I couldn't end this video without saying that one of the things, for better or for worse, that makes Yu-Gi-Oh! Unique is the artwork. It ties back into the Duel Monsters era and Yu-Gi-Oh! Having that star quality we talked about. A lot of that is the artwork. And it's definitely not just that era, although I am a big advocate for the game going back to that general artistic direction. I'm not going to sit here and say that GX or 5Ds looks bad. I'm not as big of a fan of that era as I am of the Duel Monsters era when it comes to, the characters, the anime, the IP in general, but they're not bad either. Like, a lot of those cards look badass. There are so many unique and cool cards and archetypes from other eras, even though they're not my preference, they're not bad. I think that modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Is really where it starts getting really bad, is really where Yu-Gi-Oh! Starts turning into this mush of random crap, and a lot of it starts getting into gooner anime territory that, if you're into that, no problem. I'm not judging you on that. A lot of people think that I'm this boomer that just doesn't like or get anime, even though the first thing that greets you when you come to my channel is an anime music video that I made. Like, obviously I like anime. A lot of people seem to also think that I'm this Puritan, that I'm very religious or something, because I mentioned that I went to Catholic school and I was raised Catholic. Even though I talked about getting into astral projection and a lot of these new agey things, I'm really not even a Christian anymore. I'm agnostic. A lot of people seem to think that I'm like this conservative Puritan and I just don't like any of the stuff that's sexually related or whatever. A lot of people seem to think that that's where the criticism's coming from, and it's not. I'm not judging you. You can fap to whatever you want. I don't care. What I do care about is the fact that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is starting to not look as unique as it once was. This whole anime thing is very generic the way it looks now. Everybody else is doing it, and it's kind of robbing Yu-Gi-Oh! Of its original artistic essence, which I've talked a ton about on this channel, and I'm not going to get into this debate again. Like, let's leave it there. I don't personally like it, but a lot of people like it, and that's fine. It is one of the things that still makes Yu-Gi-Oh! Unique, and the thing that people say is that there's something for everyone. That is a very common argument. Because there are so many different archetypes and new cards being printed, there is literally something for everyone. That is in fact something that makes Yu-Gi-Oh! Unique, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Doesn't do these weird collabs with My Little Pony and SpongeBob, which helps it be a little more unique. Even Pokemon, I think they've done a very good job of introducing new Pokemon that look cool, but a lot of it still relies on the main stuff. Like Charizard, Pikachu, Eevee, and all the evolutions and whatnot are still kind of the face of Pokemon, and I think that that's actually a good thing. I wish that Yu-Gi-Oh would do more of that, but for better or for worse, that does make Yu-Gi-Oh unique. There's always new stuff being printed out. There's something for everybody, and there is a big diversity of different themes that to me just look like a mush or like a soup at this point, but I digress. Most people like it and say that it makes the game unique, so I think it should be included in the video also. The other thing that people often will point out is that the cards and the artwork has very good lore. Even though the lore is not explicitly written on the cards, especially nowadays where every card has, a wall of text and there's no room to give a description, through the artwork of the cards, a story gets told, and a lot of people are really into it, and a lot of different cards have references to each other, so they kind of tell a story. Different cards that have nothing to do with each other will have a repeating theme or a repeating monster that kind of tells a story, like they connect into a story, and a lot of people like that, and I think it's cool too. And these are all the things that, in my opinion, make Yu-Gi-Oh! Unique and special till this day. Some of them for better or for worse, but they certainly make it unique, and it's certainly the reason why so many people still play the game till this day. If you stuck with me till the very end, as always, I thank you for your time. If you liked the video, don't forget to leave me a like, and if you want to see more content like this in the future, don't forget to subscribe. I hope you have a great week. Thanks for watching.